Greetings, this is Kitty Gakure Jones. I just wanted to make a quick shot inspired by the brother Kid Organic's video, Beauty and the Beast. He talks about in the video, he makes the point that ethnic European women are checking for brothers because they feel either consciously or subconsciously that they're not being protected, that they are at risk. And I wanted to back my man up with this point because he's dead on. But the thing is, this is a historical fact. The truth is, a lot of ethnic European racialists will say, our women, we're defending our white woman. She is the paradigm of virtue. She is to be unsullied by negroids and all this other kind of stuff. And we've heard this argument for many thousands of years. But when we look at the historical reality, say from the beginning of this country, we know, and other places in the world, we know that ethnic European men were quick to sell out their women. And their women know it too. That's why so many ethnic European women have not racialist, but feminist tendencies, or are full-blown hardcore feminists. The overwhelming majority of the opposition to, say, DJ Trump is ethnic European women themselves. So I want to quickly talk about the historical record for a moment. So first, if we take a look at brother J.A. Rogers' Sex and Race Volume 1, page 120 of the Kindle, Mr. Rogers writes, "The Europeans in West Africa gave free rein to their lusts and found the Negro women very willing." Barbot wrote, "They make no scruple to prostitute themselves to Europeans for a slender profit, so great is their inclination to white men, which often leads occasions mighty quarrels with their husbands." The picture of these slave dealers drawn by Hervey Allen in Allied Adverse is historically true. G.F. Dowd tells of a Brazilian mulatto on the west coast who had a harem of women of all colors and invited Drake to take his pick of them. White wives were even brought from Europe for the native chiefs in the hope of pinning them down to Christianity or to get good bargains in slave trading. Catholic missionaries married a white sister of the Order of St. Thomas to the Black King of Benin. Others were married to the kings of Wari. 2 Negro priests secured a white wife for King Mingo of the later kingdom about 1683. Her mulatto son, Don Antonio, inherited the kingdom and became one of the most notorious slave dealers of West Africa. In time, some of the Negro chiefs came to demand white wives just as they did rum and gunpowder. Shaka, Zulu king and one of the most formidable conquerors of all time, had 2 white wives, one of whom had long red hair that covered her like a mantle. The Negro chiefs wanted white wives principally to impress their neighbors with the idea that they were now united with their white ruler brothers in Europe with their guns and armies. Dan Crawford, noted missionary, tells of Chief Mushidi of South Africa, who asked for and received from the Portuguese a white wife, hoping thereby to link his capital with the courts of Europe and acquire an awe-inspiring prestige so great that the tribes lining his trade route out of the Atlantic would not dare to molest his caravans. The most celebrated offer of this kind from Africa to Europe was, however, that of Moulay Ismail, Morocco's greatest ruler, to the Princess de Conti, daughter of Louis XIV. Now, there's a lot of information packed in this package, so let me quickly break it down. The ethnic European argument that they value their women is bullshit because they were trading their women off to Negroes, to Africans, to black men. The argument that, African women or, dark-skinned females or Negro females of various countries are exclusively loyal to the ebony or the black African man is bullshit. We know that is false. Just from this passage alone, we know that it's false. And we're going to cover a quick comments section that I recently got involved in David Carroll's channel that, again, demonstrates this tendency in the modern day. Also, we have the Negro chiefs themselves making bargains with the Europeans on their own terms. So this debunks the whole myth of superior IQs and all of that, because if these African chiefs, these African kings, were not on the same level as far as intelligence with the ethnic Europeans, they would not even think about negotiating and making these political alliances. And then also, this kills the whole pro-black argument that, you know, the Africans were forced to sell their people into slavery, or that somehow the Europeans have 100% of the responsibility. All I have to say to the pro-blacks that try to argue this point is grow the fuck up. We're adults. Hundreds of years have passed. We have to look at this history with a clear eye. The Negro kings were demanding ethnic European women, and the ethnic European men, these so-called high IQ individuals, were giving them their women gladly, as we will see. Where is the ethnic European woman's protection? And even Shaka Zulu himself had a redhead. So in that respect, my first consensual encounter with a female was a redhead girl, and Shaka had a red hair, so I guess that makes me a chief. Okay, sorry, getting carried away. But this particular passage destroys so many talking points. Pro-black, white nationalist, low-class black female. It is amazing. And also bolsters the whole SYSBM point of view, because, again, we have our African brothers saving themselves or adding women to the herd. It is what it is. That's what men do in a patriarchy. They acquire women to bring into the fold, just like I talked about in my last video, resistance is futile. But I want to make this short, so I'm moving on to The Invention of the White Race, written by Theodore W. Allen, who is an ethnic European scholar. Location 1739 in the Kindle. A new opportunity for venture capital, maids for wives. A third direct and indirect source of labor power, and now they're speaking of the American colonies, was sought by the importation of women. As early as 1618, enterprising men were specializing in this labor supply service. This was revealed in 2 arrests made in the fall of that year. One man, Owen Evans, who was a messenger for the king, ranged over 3 counties of southeastern England, pressing maidens for his majesty's service for the Bermudas and Virginia, paying 4 shillings to one man, 5 to another, 12 pence to a third, and threatening them with hanging for refusal to comply, so they testified. Evans ordered women, now these are English women, to be taken up in the king's name and delivered to him at Sherborne in Dorset. He wore a badge of authority from the king's chamber, which it was said later was validly his, but which he used illegally in this business. As many as 40 women were said to have fled the one parish of Ottery in Devon to escape this frightful form of class and sex oppression. They must have had to flee for points far distant, because young women from adjoining parishes were also taking flight in terror. So when the Kid Organic talks about ethnic European feeling insecure, ethnic European women checking for brothers, you know, looking for men that will protect them, they have valid historical reasons to feel this way. These ethnic European people were kidnapping and selling their own women, these women that they allegedly were putting up on a pedestal. Another man named Robinson forged a commission for himself and used it to take up rich yeomen's daughters to serve his majesty for breeders in Virginia unless they were ransomed by their parents and friends. He was apprehended, tried, hanged, quartered, and drawn for counterfeiting the Great Seal. And they go on to say, subsequently, bourgeois gentlemen and the aristocrats made the trade respectable and profitable. The trade, the slave trade, the ethnic European female slave trade, run and operated by their own men. This again, right? On the ground of making of the men feel at home in Virginia and profitable by operating it as a Virginia company monopoly. The same thing as the East African company or East Indian company and the African company and all of that. It's the same business model. Ethnic European women were basically subject to, not all of them, but many of them were subjected to the same sort of oppression as ebony men were. So they have a lot of common cause, truth be told. Let's see. Persons sent by the company to Virginia between August 1619 and April 1620. 90 were young maids to make wives for so many of the former tenants. This is included in a note of shipping men and provisions sent to Virginia. Women, it seems, were counted as provisions. The company in June 1620 projected a plan for sending 100 more maids for wives in a total of 800 immigrants. On 20 December 1621, the Warwick arrived in Virginia with a cargo that the company's accompanying letter advertised as an extraordinary choice lot of 38 maids for wives. Investors were apparently encouraged by this bright aspect of an otherwise not very promising general business outlook. In November 1621, a subsidiary joint stock for trading in maids for wives to Virginia was established in the amount of 800 pounds sterling. Virginia company leaders Edwin Sandys and the Earl of Southampton patriotically headed the list of investors with subscriptions of 200 pounds each. And moving quickly, same book, The Invention of the White Race, Volume 2, location 3380. Supplementary sources of unpaid labor were tapped under a Virginia law passed in 1681 requiring a child of a European American mother and an African American father to serve until the age of 30. That was 6 years of extra unpaid labor beyond what would have been served by a child of two European American bond laborers. Under a Maryland law in effect from 1664 to 1692, any freeborn woman who married an African American lifetime bond laborer was bound to serve the master of such slave during the life of her husband. Presented with such an opportunity, many Maryland owners deliberately fostered marriages of European American women and African American men bond laborers in order to get the benefit of the added unpaid labor time of their descendants. The ruling class understood that the bond laborers' sex drives were as irresistible and ardent as those of others, and therefore there is no danger that the considering of their progeny's condition will stop propagation. In other words, ethnic European women are being married to ebony men, be they indigenous, Negroid, or Africans that are imported. They were marrying these women off deliberately so they could hold them and their children as slaves. This is the protection that ethnic European men are giving to their women historically. So when ethnic European women have real doubts, there's a historical justification for that fear. Location 3424. When the double penalty of the 1662 law proved generally ineffective, the Virginia Assembly in 1691 passed another making any English woman in this circumstance, free or bond, subject to public sale by the church wardens of the parish, into bond servitude for 5 years. For those who were bond laborers, this added servitude was to be postponed until the completion of her current period of bondage. And it goes on to talk about real cases. So this is historical fact and not fiction. Turning again to Brother J.A. Rogers, Sex and Race, Volume 2, page 101. He talks about, in Haiti, why was an absolute color line needed and who were the most eager supporters of it? Answer: the white women. Yes, and they had abundant cause for complaint. Neglect was their lot. They were but so many castaways in the lap of luxury. Partly because of the greater sex appeal of the colored women to the white men, the climate of the colony was hard for white women, and partly because in concubinage, the white man had little or no responsibility, the white woman had a most difficult time in getting a husband or even any sex attention. So this answers the question why many low-class black women are the property, body and soul of ethnic European men. It's because these colored women, as they call them, were the sex objects and the objects of sexual desire for these ethnic European men. So this is why we have like Storm Thurmond, like I covered in my Race and IQ Does Not Add Up video that I did recently. This is why you have these ethnic European men sleeping with Negro females, because they view them as sexual objects and they find them to be more attractive than their own women. And as we're seeing and have seen, they have no compunction about throwing their own women under the bus. Turning to page 203, Brother Rogers writes, less than a century after the arrival of the first Negroes, some had been bred so white it was absolutely impossible to tell them from the rest of the whites. Captain Marryat, a leading English writer who visited America in the 1830s, tells of his great astonishment at seeing how fair some of the slaves were. He says that he saw a 12-year-old girl carrying a child, and that girl's whole appearance was that of a pretty English cottager's child. Knowing that white people very seldom went into domestic service, he inquired of the girl if she were a slave, hardly expecting her to say yes. But she did say yes. Later, he met her master, who told him how much he had paid for her. Levi Coffin tells of a white slave he knew. A stranger would never suspect that there was a drop of African blood in her. Now we're talking about, by the way, the American South. Her form was tall and graceful, her face beautiful, and her expressions one of intelligence. She was seduced by her master and became the mother of a handsome boy, apparently white. Cases like this could be multiplied. He tells of another young woman as white as any of our wives or daughters who was held as a slave in Kentucky and made her escape and came to this city. She found a position as a servant girl among white people, and no one ever suspected she belonged to the colored race. So this obviously means that, as Brother Rogers goes on to write, you had ethnic European women who were legit kidnapped from up north and down south and sold as slaves. When I talk about on the European American Negro slave narratives, I can give more documentation on that. He continues on page 204. Reverend J.H. Augie said he was struck by the whiteness of some of the Negroes, and he spoke to a large congregation of slaves, a third of whom were as white as himself with red hair and blue eyes. On some plantations he found very few slaves of unmixed blood. One slaveholder said to him, "There is a girl who does not look very white in the face owing to her exposure, but when I strip her to whip her, I find she has a skin as fair as my wife." He continues, Mrs. Child said, "The right to hold slaves does not depend upon difference of complexion, and advertisements show that very intelligent men and women with very clear white complexions, blue eyes, and sandy hair are continually sold upon the auction block." She gives a list of advertisements appearing in newspapers for these white slaves. So ethnic European females, even the white ones, or southern white ethnic European females, they were at risk. They were in danger. He continues, Tower describes the sale of a slave who was whiter than many, nay than most of the Anglo-Saxon ladies, of medium-sized, well-developed, beautiful black hair, black and sparkling eyes. And so again, the fear or the feeling of a lack of protection that some of these ethnic European women have today is justified if you look at the history. And Brother Rogers goes on to talk about how ethnic Europeans were actually kidnapped and sold into slavery, and I cover that in more detail in other videos. Page 213. Rivalry between white wives and Negro concubines. The white wife sometimes had a formidable rival for her husband's affection in the slave girl, and many divorce suits resulted. So strong was the rivalry that some white women tried to imitate the mannerisms of the Negro girls, a fact that amazed some visitors to America. Now, the brother Kid Organic and others have spoken about how ethnic European women are catering themselves to ebony men, and how they, they want to get the lips and the fat ass and, the braids and all that shit. This is a very old practice. This hasn't gone anywhere. Except that this time, now that they're allowed to legally, they're just going after the brothers directly. But he continues, so they have to be content with being mistress of the house and the servants, while some slave girl, black, yellow, or white, as the case may be, is mistress of her husband's affection. In many of the leading homes of the South, the white wife was but the head of a harem. He continues, white women were idealized, of course, so highly idealized that they often thought too good for sex relations that was only fit for slaves. So, see the inconsistency here. We have ethnic European being sold as wives for sale to the Americas. We have ethnic European women sent to Africa proper to be the wives of Negro kings and chiefs. We have ethnic European men who are ignoring their women back during antebellum slavery times in the South. And this goes on to this very day. Now, not everyone is like this, but the currents of history are strong. This is just the history of the interaction between the ethnic groups. It is what it is. So I'm not going to drag this out. I do want to cover one more thing. The Honorable David Carroll in his video, The Bachelorette and Black Male Propaganda Part 2. So at this point, we all know that the typical low-class black woman belongs body and soul to the ethnic European man. It is what it is, which of course makes ethnic European women feel insecure, which is another motivating factor for them checking for brothers, both in the past and today. But let's go through this. Wisdom Speaks said, black woman with no value equals black women that mate with black men. Black woman with value equals black women that mate with white men. Sounds like black men stay losing, and as usual, white men stay winning. Now, this is a self-described Negro female. But wait, there's more. I responded, exactly right. High-value brothers are dating out in droves, SYSBM. She goes on to talk about black men with value equals black men still depend on the white man for jobs, housing, food, water, etc. So forth and so on. She says, the only black women that do what you're saying, in other words, being ratchet and so forth, are the ghetto hood rats, and unfortunately, that is the only type of black women that men like you can attract. As DC mentioned in this video, David Carroll, these type of women with 3 to 4 bastard children by different daddies have no value. But women like the upcoming Black Bachelorette, who, by the way, will choose an ethnic European man, is not that type of woman. The Bachelorette does not have children. She is a lawyer working for a well-established law firm. She comes from a stable upper middle class family, and her father is a judge. She reminds me of my daughter, who is in her 2nd year of medical school, and trust me, women this do not go around ripping out each other's weaves and will never date or marry broke niggas like you. Actually, my daughter is off the market, engaged to an Asian doctor, and yes, my black husband and I are very pleased with her choice. Did you catch that? This is exactly what the brothers have been speaking on. This is exactly why it is inevitable that low-class black women are going to be replaced. Now, I replied to her, I said, okay, I'll bite. So according to this statement, black women with no black value equals black women who mate with black men. And this statement, actually my daughter is off the market and engaged to an Asian doctor, and yes, my black husband and I are very pleased with her choice. That means by your own logic that you are a black woman of no value. I am curious. She continues, unfortunately, women of my generation were brainwashed to believe that black men were our only options. The truth of the matter, all black men in America are conquered and defeated. As a result, the women of your race are the spoils of war. Your race. So she's distancing herself. See the hypocrisy. See the bullshit. And you wonder why these women are being replaced. You wonder why brothers are dating out in droves. This is allegedly a Negro female saying this. Then she goes on to say, my black husband knows this to be the truth, so he's either the biggest simp in America or she's just disrespecting the shit out of him without his knowledge. She goes on, however, unlike you cowardly black males of today, men in my generation did not blame women for their problems, and they were and still are wise enough to know the true root to our ills. Among my replies, I said, well, so long as you go to your graves considering yourselves defeated and worthless, that's on you. My great-great-great-grandsire fought with distinction in the great race war called the American Civil War. 114th Regiment, U.S. Colored Troops, killed many ethnic Euros and hostile Indians to secure my freedom. While you consider yourself and your husband to be worthless, I hold my head up high as a free man, doing just fine in the world. Thank you very much. Listen, I know you are consumed by self-hate, and I feel sorry for you. I wish your daughter well, and I hope you can come to appreciate who you are before you die. This is a modern day example of all the historical trends we have seen, be it in ancient Africa, be it in ancient Europe, be it in the Middle Ages, be it in near modern Europe, near modern Africa, near modern America, everywhere on the globe. Understand, these women are not your women. The low-class black female is not your woman. She keeps telling you day after day after day after day. And the ethnic European woman does not belong to the ethnic European man. They have been proving that for centuries. The racialists talk all this bullshit, but even the most hardcore white supremacists, as Asian writer points out in eloquent detail, the most hardcore supremacists themselves deal with Asian women almost exclusively. Do you know why that is? Because most ethnic European women don't trust these racialists because they know and understand what these ethnic European racialist men have done to them in the past. So, this has been a hopefully short video or shorter video backing up the excellent points that the brother Kid Organic made, and also buttressing my argument that I made on videos throughout this channel. The typical low-class black female has no respect for you. She doesn't want you. She's not looking out for your best interest. She thinks you're conquered. And if this woman, this Wisdom Speaks, had the opportunity, I am quite sure she would have gotten with an ethnic European man as well. And on that note, I am Kitty Got Good 8 Jones. Nimpo Ikan.